I think the thing that has changed most since 2006, I'm wondering what you think about this, is there was always an evangelical component. There's obviously an American Jewish component to it. There's a significant financial incentive. As you said, like they just take people out of Congress whenever they want. They do it in a very sophisticated way. They get some black centrists to run against, Jamal Bowman or Cori Bush so they can't be accused of racism, and they give them so much money that they program them, and suddenly they're pro-Israel and pro-AIPAC, and they make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. But the book, Wald and Mearsheimer talk about the evangelical faction, but it's grown so much in terms of the power that American evangelicals have, political power in this country. They got much more active they never really used to be a big political force in the United States. It was really as a response to Roe, and then it kept growing and growing. And now you have an American ambassador to Israel that's not even Jewish, the first time in a long time, if not ever. But it's Mike Huckabee, who has a ardently theological, religious devotion to Israel because he believes that Israel should occupy the entire territory from the river to the sea in order for the Messiah to come back and then consign all the Jews to hell. But Israel's fine to take that theory since they don't believe that will happen.
Right.
Do you think that seems to me to be a big part of, even as part of this America First movement, why this contradiction that's so obvious, like America first, let's give all our money to Israel. The reason that conflict, that very glaring conflict, is not recognized is because of this evangelical fervor within the Republican Party that keeps this obsession with Israel stronger than ever.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is a huge part of it. And of course, to the stuff you were saying before, I think it's also like it's important to recognize that, like, even if you have the Israel lobby and you have like financial interests or who are pushing in the direction of always unconditionally supporting Israel, it's also the fact that, and this is one of the things that it's the nature of government. And I think it's something that people, especially people in this type of space, when we're talking about, people who listen to shows like this, they listen because they care about about policy, and they've thought about these things, and they enjoy like hearing these perspectives. But sometimes we can have the illusion that that's how like the state apparatus is run, and that people are making arguments, and whoever has the better argument gets that policy. But of course, like, we all know that's not how it actually works. And the truth is that what's good for power in Washington, D.C., or what's good for business influencers who have influence on Washington, D.C., that ends up being the decisions that get made. And so not only do you have, say, like the neoconservative ideologues, and then you have the Israeli lobby, and then you have these, but also their proposed policy is just really good for weapons companies, and you know what I mean? And it's really good for people in the CIA or in the, whatever branch of the national security apparatus. They may not be ideologically Zionists, but if there's a neoconservative movement that's pushing that they get a lot more power, they also might kind of fall in line with that. So that's a pretty big factor. But there's no question, I mean, there's tens of millions of evangelical Christians. And to hear Mike Huckabee in his own words, because if people haven't heard it, maybe it could sound like you're being slightly hyperbolic in the way you describe it, but I assure you, anyone who hasn't heard it, Glenn is not. And it is the way he speaks about, it's the creepiest freaking thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, there is just simply no other area, no other policy where anyone ever speaks like that who's actually in a position of power. Like, I mean, you may see like, the Jerry Falwell or someone like that has a show, but in terms of like like there's no argument where someone could Mike Huckabee just says there's no such thing as a Palestinian, and there's no such thing as a settlement, and there's no such thing as an occupation because God gave all of this to the Jews. And like, it's just no one ever. Look, even the pro-lifers have to try to make an argument. They don't just get to say it's in my book and God says so. They'll say life begins at conception or something like that. It's wild.
Yeah, they'll use scientific data that like the fetus has a heartbeat, has a self-consciousness. Right. There's moral arguments that are mounted. It's not sufficient to just say, oh, the Bible says no. But and I want to make very clear, because every time I talk about this, I get a lot of emails and from people watching and others that not being evangelical does not signify that you embrace this kind of almost caricature of the rapture theology. But a lot of the people who are in Congress and in power, certainly like Mike Huckabee, absolutely do. And as you say, you go back and compare Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush the first, and even the Clinton administration, which was very pro-Israel, the second George Bush administration, and you compare what they said on Israel, which is that under no circumstances can Israel occupy the West Bank. Reagan himself imposed more limitations on Israel than almost any other president since the recognition of Israel, arguably. But you compare that to what people like Mike Huckabee are now saying, and it's just in a completely different universe of a framework, way more pro-Israel, because they're speaking religiously and theologically and dogmatically, and not from the perspective of geopolitics. And that's what I think has changed so much. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.